Hello.
Hello. Hello, everybody. So I know we had a number of people that were registered for the webinar, but we have just a small group. Maybe that's a Monday morning thing, but so I'm going to try and talk less so that we can just have more discussion as we're just a little small group. So good morning. Thanks for joining us. And my name is Shannon Biggs, and I'm the director and co-founder of Movement Rights. And Movement Rights is based in San Francisco and in Richmond and in Santa Cruz, where where our team are located. And pictured in the first slide is that's me on the left, and in the middle is Casey Camp Hornick. And next to her on the right is Penny Opal Plant. Penny and I are co-founders of Movement Rights, and Casey Camp Hornick, who is on our board and is the leader of the Ponca Rights of Nature campaign. And some of you know Casey and know what a leader she is. And she was supposed to be able to join us on this webinar, but was unable to. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit of information about her as well in this presentation. So next slide. There we go. So this is the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature webinar. I'm one of the co-founders of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, and we have some other folks here on the call who are also part of the executive committee and working groups of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. On this call, we're just going to talk a little bit about movement rights, who we are, what we do, the rights of nature, the Ponca tribe of Oklahoma, and fossil fuels, their challenges, and what they've done to address the challenges of fossil fuels in their community, which is in Oklahoma. A little bit about Casey Camp Hornick and becoming the first tribe in the United States to recognize rights of nature into tribal law and open the discussion. So that's sort of just the general framework, and we're not going to go through it necessarily in that exact order because I'm going to show a little video of the campaign next. But just to say a little bit about Movement Rights, we are an organization that works internationally to build the movement around rights of nature. We work nationally with tribes in the U.S. Around rights of nature, and we work in California specifically on working with communities to pass local laws that recognize the rights of nature, as well as to address corporate rights, corporate constitutional protections, and to assert local self-governing authority. So that's a little bit about Movement Rights and who we are, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that when we open it up. But for now, I thought the best way to start would just be to show a little bit about some of our work and the campaign in Ponca. So with that, Hannah, if you could take it away.
Perfect. Everyone sees YouTube, I hope. Let's see here. And
I live in an area of Oklahoma where fracking has become an institution. There are 13,000 active wells there going on, and each one of them has an injection wells. Since 2008, when there was 5 earthquakes in Oklahoma that were under 1 to 1.5.
Hannah? We seem to have lost the sound. I don't know if people can hear me. Hannah? Okay, I don't know if people can hear me. Can folks hear me? Okay, so you can hear me, but not the presentation. So I'm not sure if Hannah is going to be able to fix that, but essentially this video is image of, that's Casey Camp Hornick there. We are having what is essentially the very first demonstration or protest in Oklahoma in front of the oil and gas, what they call the museum for ConocoPhillips 60 and Phillips 66. So I was hoping that we would be able to hear Casey in her own words speaking there about Hannah, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you, that video had no sound.
Really?
Yeah. Is there a way? It's super short, so I think we might
Let's
try
see.
it again.
Yeah, sure. I'll play it again. No worries. Let's see if I'm just gonna. 1 second.
Sorry, I'd really like Casey to be able to sort of, speak
course.
about
Of course.
in her own.
I thought there was sound. Sorry.
It started with sound and then it went away.
Oh, that's weird. And let's see here. I have the video here.
Technical difficulties.
Yes.
Always fun.
Let's see here.
It's one of the reasons I don't usually use slides or anything when I talk, because it's always worse when the technology doesn't work. Let's try this one more time, and if not, we'll just go to the slide.
You hear it. If you don't hear it, write in the chat, okay?
Thank you.
I live in an area of Oklahoma where fracking has become an institution. There are 13,000 active wells there going on, and each one of them has an injection wells. Since 2008, when there was 5 earthquakes in Oklahoma that were under 1 to 1.5, we have escalated on a yearly basis until this year, in 1 year, we have had over 5,000 earthquakes.
Not talking about, in current existing law, nature is seen as property, as a slave. As Native Americans were once not recognized, their rights were not recognized. African Americans, women, the list goes on and on. Our court of law makes mistakes all the time. And sometimes it's working just perfectly, just not for the right folks.
We're talking about using the rights of Mother Earth as a bridge to get us from this disaster that's all over the world into the future where we have clean, renewable energy, where we're assured that our children and our grandchildren will have a healthy air, healthy water, and healthy soil to grow healthy food on.
It's these companies who are killing them. Oil workers have the second highest mortality rate of anyone on earth, and they deserve better. We don't want anybody out of jobs. We don't want things to go back for them. But we're praying that they have a just transition into renewable energies. What do we do with the oil? We keep it in the soil. But that water, the sacred water of life, is under attack from fracking and injection wells. What do you do?
Great. So that is Casey Camp Hornick, and that was our very first demonstration and action. That was 2.5 years ago, And um, we also were there. We met with the tribal council to introduce them to rights of nature. We had an all-day sort of summit with folks in the community to educate them about rights of nature, what it was, and it was sort of the launch of the campaign for recognizing rights of nature into tribal law. So am I in charge of this, or are you doing these slides?
I'm thinking I can just continue if you want. Yeah.
Fantastic. Next slide, please. Whoops. Okay, so those are photos of Casey Camp Hornick on, wow, why are those moving so quickly? What's going on there?
Sorry, my computer that's acting out. It was this one, or was it this one here?
They're all fine. It's all good. Casey, that's her standing in front of the largest refinery in the community. When you go to Ponca City, there are two sides of town. On one side of town is where the tribe lives, and where the tribal territories are. And it's not a reservation in the terms of you can't like draw just a circle around it. It's kind of a patchwork of little areas. But essentially, they're on the south side of town. And that's where all the refineries are. That's where the pipelines are. That's where all the fracking rigs are. That's where all of the ugly activities in town are located. Not necessarily on tribal lands, but that whole area. There is definitely something, as Casey calls it, environmental genocide and environmental racism happening in Ponca City. Everywhere you can take a toxic tour of the area of Ponca City and tribal land by standing virtually in one place, because any place you stand, you can turn in a circle and see fracking wells and rigs and oil bubbling up from the ground, and just the signs of all of the destruction that is happening in their community. Next slide. Casey has been a leader internationally, nationally around Indigenous rights within her tribe. She has always been an environmental leader. Her family is historically just been a family that has been very prominent in their tribe as leaders for the tribe. On the right-hand side, you can see those are just some of the members of her family that were gathered on any one day on her farm. So when you ask Casey why does she do the work she does, why does she put her body on the line, this is why. Next slide. So rights of nature, of course, is this notion, it's not just a notion, but this idea that rights are not gifts from government, but rather there's something that exists simply for our understanding of human rights by virtue of being born. And if we as humans have rights, then certainly the ecosystems and nature and the earth has rights to exist, to flourish, and to evolve its natural cycles. And if we fail to recognize that inherent right for ecosystems to do those things, we fail to recognize our own human rights, because this is really about recognizing that humans have a place within this natural cycle, not separate from nature. We are part of nature. And the picture of Casey there saying, "We do not buy and sell the air. We do not buy and sell the water." This is about the understanding, the recognition of rights of nature really coming from these indigenous cosmology, these ideas of living in balance with nature, that we are not separate, and that when we start buying and selling the earth and seeing it as property, we separate ourselves from the life source. that sustains us. And pictured on the right, this is are just steps. Penny and I do trainings. That's Penny with the sign "We Have Awoken." Next to that is Casey with her granddaughter that is like all of the children in the tribe. They are raised as activists. So they go to the meetings. They are part of the discussions, not just activist meetings, but really that this is something that is part of educating the next generation, is that they're just born into tribal ceremony. They are born into activism. They are born into the culture and the life of what it means to be Ponca, what it means to be Indigenous. Below that is a picture of well, I'm in there. That's her son Mikasi, who is a leader for the Ponca Nation and one of the people who was first at Standing Rock. Brian Paras is next to me. He is from Houston, Texas, and works on oil and gas issues. And on the other side of me is Robbie Disu, who is was the head of Stop the Frack Attack Network, and we were all there for one of the second actions on Ponca Nation. And on that day was the day that we met with the tribal council and last year, and they agreed to pass rights of nature into law. Next slide. So this is a part of the toxic tour of and that includes visiting the Ponca Tribal Cemetery. Around the cemetery, what Casey is looking at off into the distance, which isn't really visible in this shot. I mean, you'd have to look really closely, but it's there, are injection wells and oil rigs surrounding the Ponca Cemetery. Which is just yet another sort of violation of their community to have the city also decided to build the dump next to the cemetery as well. They lose a tribal member a week to cancers, to autoimmune and respiratory diseases related to fracking. And so for her, the work is really about how do we change this understanding of the earth as resources to really understanding that these are life sources. Next. On the toxic tour, which is just driving around Ponca, you'll see the signs there. It says warning petroleum pipeline. That's the KXL pipeline, which passes through Ponca territory. And this is farmland. Those are cows who are drinking toxic water right above the petroleum pipeline. And the picture below, what looks like just a muddy field, that is mud, but you can also see there's just this black stuff rising from the ground, and that's everywhere. In many places, the fields are black. The wheat comes up with, it grows through the oil and comes up with sort of a black goo. And you can't grow organic food anywhere near Ponca City. In fact, 16 miles away is the closest spot you could actually say that you could grow organic food. Next slide. So on the right-hand side is a picture of Oklahoma, and all those red dots are earthquakes and oil rigs. They're all in the same areas. In the center of all of that, big red madness is Ponca City. It is kind of the epicenter of where a lot of these activities are located. And Oklahoma, for those of you who may or may not know, is not prone to, they're not supposed to have earthquakes. That's supposed to be for me in California. That's supposed to be what we're famous for, not Oklahoma. Their homes are not built for it. Their communities are not built for it. And they're happening with injection wells at a rate, as Casey said. I mean, there were over 1,000 in 1 year. Those earthquakes, as you can see, not just the large ones that split apart the streets and tear down the cities, but the ones that, there was days there was like 70 in 1 day across Oklahoma. And those earthquakes underground ensure that the cement casings around the fracking rigs and the pipelines themselves are going to fail. They're going to crack. It is guaranteed. And essentially 100% of them are leaking, which of course is why why everything is, why the water is so bad, and why there is oil just pumping up from the ground everywhere on its own, where it's not supposed to be. And while what hunters say that they can no longer hunt the animals if they open them up, there's nothing but black and worms inside of the animals. It's why people who there were swimming pools. People did used to swim in their swimming pools, but they can't swim in them anymore because they're cracked. But a lot of people fill up the swimming pools a little bit so that animals going by can have some water, because the rivers and the streams are also polluted, and the animals are also dying, in addition to all of the health issues and impacts that the people are suffering. Next slide. So what do you do about it? Well, Casey has been an activist around for her community and for the protection of her community, and has been no stranger to the city council meeting with state representatives over fracking, putting her body on the line in Standing Rock and at other places to stop the KXL pipeline, and doing basically everything that can be done, certainly within the law as it exists, to try and defend her community. There's not a lot of support in the larger Oklahoma, because Oklahoma, when you fly into Oklahoma, the first thing you see when you get out of the Tulsa airport, at least what we saw when we first traveled there, was a huge American flag flying over the airport, thanking the oil and gas companies for the economy. And that there is just this huge support. Scott Pruitt, who went on to head the EPA temporarily for the Trump administration, he's from Oklahoma. All of the leadership of Oklahoma, political leadership, is in support and in lockstep with the oil and gas community and the industry. In fact, the governor, Mary Wells, had proclaimed a day of prayer for the oil fields, a statewide day of prayer, where people went to churches. She asked all of the priests across the country to open their doors, put on a pot of coffee, and have people kneel on, get down on their knees and pray for the oil and gas industry and for the oil fields themselves. So this is the kind of political environment in which she and her family and her tribe have taken action. So at the top there, you see that's Penny speaking to the tribal council meeting, and below that you see people that was at the second action, and below that is a ceremonial dance. That's her granddaughter there with her, that included a dance for rights of nature for the whole community as part of our day of action there last October. And when I started talking to her several years ago about rights of nature, one of the things that she felt that was powerful was that it was kind of an understanding of indigenous law in Western law terms. And it was the first time that she felt that perhaps human law as it exists under the U.S. Constitution could begin to reflect what their indigenous values were. And so, because there's a lot of reluctance to enter into yet another treaty or yet another, law, the sort of white man's, legal scheme. And so there's a lot of reluctance to that, since that has not been met typically historically with a great deal of honor, respect. All treaties, every treaty the United States has entered with tribes has been violated over the last 400 years. So what they felt was be very powerful was to write the law, not just within like a city ordinance, but as the sovereign nation of the Ponca people, and to write that into law that that the earth and the tribe and the land has the right from the core of the earth to the top of the soil, to the air, to the water, has the inherent right to exist, flourish, thrive, and evolve its natural cycles, and that that they could actually recognize legal standing for the ecosystem in a court of law. Recognizing it into tribal law would be the first step toward actually being able to bring corporations and suing them on behalf of the earth in tribal court. So in October of last year, November, the tribe agreed to put it forward into statutory law, meaning that the tribal council put it into law. We worked on that with them over the next several months, and in February they made it official and it became law in the Ponca Nation. And the Ponca Nation has become the first tribe in the U.S. to recognize rights of nature into law, which is hugely significant. And it's hugely significant because while there have been other communities that have done it, there's been a reluctance, as I said, on the part of tribes to participate in a sort of lawmaking scheme that was just yet another law that would be violated, another law that was meaningless. This is actually something that they own, that they can see themselves in, and that they are responsible for in their sovereign territories. So that is a huge significance. And the fact that Casey, who's such an amazing leader, and her family and her tribe have been the first to do this, has really been an inspiration to other tribes to step forward and explore this as a way of protecting their own lands. Next slide. So these are just some of the images of people coming together for some of the actions in Ponca. Next slide. And congratulations to the Ponca tribe of Oklahoma. This was that picture of Casey with that big beaming smile. That was taken about 2 minutes after the end of the meeting, where the Ponca tribe agreed to pass the law and become the first. So that big, beautiful, beaming smile is certainly one of pride and excitement. And we're so proud to be associated and to assist the tribe in their work. So I think that's it. If you turn to the next slide, I think that's the last one. Yep, that's it. So with that, that's it for the presentation. Happy to open it up for questions and discussion. And Hannah, I'll let you manage that part.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you so much for sharing. This is a really important example of how rights of nature can be applied. And I put a message in the chat here, like if you have a question for Shannon, you can write it in the chat and add your name, or if you have a question right now, you can also just let me know and I'll give you the space to ask. So is there anyone who has a question for Shannon?
Thank you.
Let's see, Pamela Martin. Do you want to make your question?
She's on mute.
Let's see here if we can. I can unmute her from here. Let's see here. There we go. Pam?
Hi, Shannon. I wrote it in the chat. Hi, Hannah.
Hi.
Hi, Pam.
I wrote it in the chat. I just didn't want to interrupt your flow. I wanted to know if you could describe the tribal governmental process, sort of the stages that it had to go through rather. And I mean, you of course elaborated on the challenges in terms of history, but were there any other challenges for the tribe, meaning fear of reprisal or inability to make it applicable, etc.? Thanks.
Really great question. And so obviously in the state of Oklahoma, communities are forbidden from regulating or certainly banning oil and gas activities within their locality, so within their municipalities or within their counties. So their rights have been violated in that way directly from the state. The Ponca Nation, as a sovereign, federally recognized tribe, their authority doesn't come from the state; it comes from the federal government under the Bureau of Affairs, which means that they have their own constitution that, for historic reasons, may not be the one that they would have chosen, but is reminiscent of the U.S. Federal Constitution. But it gives them the authority to make local laws themselves. There are two paths that a tribe like the Ponca can go through, and they're definitely different setups, so don't necessarily. But for the Ponca Nation, they can pass a law like this, as they have done, as a statutory law, has passed this law. And like an ordinance passed by a city council. The challenge with that is that it's up to them to enforce it. It's up to the tribal council to enforce it. Like any local, government, they're elected and replaced, and there's a certain amount of impermanence in terms of passing a statutory law like that. They could choose to ignore the law that they've written. They later tribal council, business council could rescind the law. These are all limitations of this passing it as a statutory law, which is why this passing it, when we discussed with the tribal council, they're very behind this idea and absolutely wanted to move forward with this after a couple of years of these discussions and the work that Casey's done. She's a member of the tribal council, so she's certainly had influence on that practice. But at the last meeting in last November, the discussion was the length of time it would take to put it. So the other path is to write it into constitutional law and write it directly into their constitution. That requires a vote of over 80%, 90% of the tribal community, meaning that every single person of the tribe, 90% of them have to vote, and it has to pass by 80% of that. Over 80% of that. So the time it takes for that to pass it takes some time, and it means that there's a lot more public education, and that is the ultimate goal of passing this law, because once it's passed in that way, it's kind of undoable without that's a similar process, and certainly has more permanence. So the tribal council discussed that what they wanted to do was actually make it law right away. They didn't necessarily want to wait. So even so, right now it is in fact law within the tribe, and the tribal council could certainly take action on that law at any time. But this has also been seen as the first step to really making it permanent by this is the first step towards putting it into the tribal constitution and having that tribal-wide conversation, because they want to take corporations who are violating the rights of nature to court. That is a huge undertaking. And they want to take them to court in two ways. They want to actually, the law actually, they have their own tribal court within the, their system. So they want to do it two ways. The first thing they want to do is to take violators, fossil fuel violators, to court within their own system of law, their own tribal court, and have a ruling there within their own jurisdiction, as well as taking them to court into U.S. federal court. That's going to be huge. That is something that is going to take, it's going to take a couple of years. They want to find the right case. And to make all that happen, we have to work to educate the tribe, bring other tribes to bear in terms of passing resolutions in support of it, and to bring the fossil fuel. I mean, this is a standing rock kind of a situation. We need to bring the wider community of activists, of everyday people, to stand in support of a lawsuit and to take action on behalf of the rights of nature, because there's going to be huge resistance to this. So this isn't just a legal strategy. This is an organizing challenge, and this is about shifting the mindset about how the law works, who does it work for, and what do we do to see change. And going up against certainly the largest industry in the state, and some of the largest, most powerful corporations in the country, that's going to be no small feat. And prior to this, I mean, the amount of attention that Oklahoma had received in terms of activism against fossil fuel industry has been very small. So we're building this power. In the spring, we'll be hosting a large oil and gas summit on the rights of nature and indigenous rights, and we'll be bringing activists from across the country to Ponca to participate in this summit, because this is going to require, as a kind of a standing rock, kind of, not necessarily, although perhaps, that kind of a vigil in place, but the kind of attention from the community, of the larger activist community, to understand what they've done and to stand with them, whatever the next steps are, to create that kind of a groundswell and that kind of support for really carrying this forward. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and more. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon. Let's see, we have one question from Margaret. Margaret, would you like to ask the question, or do you want me to read the message?
Oh, read it, Margaret. Say it, Margaret, say it.
Let's see, I did her now. Do you hear us, Margaret?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Margaret.
Great. Hi, thanks so much, Shannon. This was wonderful. I just wanted to know if the Ponca has been advising any other tribal leaders on adopting similar policies, because I know that Casey has been very open and forthright about her initial reluctance to the idea of the rights of nature, and how she saw how it actually works in conjunction with, their own way of life. So I think her perspective can be really helpful. And I was just wondering if they were advising any other tribes.
That's a great question. And the answer is absolutely. Casey, we support anything that Casey does is, I may say we, but it's really Casey, and we go, okay, tell us what you need us to do. Right. So, we is really Casey, and we do it. We do whatever she requests. There are many tribes in the area of Oklahoma where they live. Some who have ties with fossil fuel industry, and some who don't. But all of them are, regardless of whether they have contracts. The Ponca tribe does not have any contracts with fossil fuel industry, but there are those that do. But we were there, we in support, the first intertribal rights of nature forum, IRN, Intertribal Rights of Nature, IRN Summit, IRN Forum, with 13 tribes in attendance, to discuss what they've done and explore what it would look like for other tribes to adopt this. And certainly Movement Rights has brought Casey around the country to speak she was part of, we were asked to produce a Rights of Nature presentation for the Indigenous Environmental Network, had a really large gathering on Respecting Mother Earth conference in Washington State. There were, a couple of, I don't know, maybe 1,000 or 2,000. I'm terrible at judging numbers, but maybe 1,000, mostly tribal, and elsewhere there. And Casey led one of those, presentations on what they had been doing. There has been a lot of interest in, we've been asked to host a number of other forums, those IRN forums, to build that. And that will be a huge part of the oil and gas summit that we're producing in the spring in partnership with other organizations, that we have this Indigenous Rights of Nature track. There'll be also a Indigenous youth track. In fact, the direct action that we'll be hosting there will be led by the children, and including her grandson, who has been recognized for his work around fossil fuels with the Robert F. Kennedy Award. So certainly this is an intergenerational family of activists really promoting this work. But yes, I think that the idea that other tribes are very interested in looking at this, and we're in discussion phases with sharing what that looks like with them. And it takes a little time, but this is part of the ongoing education that is in fact already happening.
Great, thank you so much.
Is there anyone else who has a question? We have a few more minutes left of the webinar.
Hi, this is Ansu. Sure, I would love to ask Shannon and you guys a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear
yes.
you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Would you like to say a little bit more about the Springtime Oil and Gas Summit so that we can just be aware of when it's happening and what's going on with that? I find, as just an interested freelancer, I tried to sign on to all these networks to make sure I'm kept abreast of what's going on. But recently, I know there was a big gathering in Ecuador, in Quito, Ecuador, a conference about the rights of nature, and it was just not on my calendar. And so I would like to be better planned in advance for these important events. And so would you like to say something about the planning or the timeline for that oil and gas summit, which you just referenced?
Yes, and is that Irish?
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
It sounds like maybe you're from Ireland.
Oh no, I'm from the U.S.
Okay. Sorry,
I'm living in Los Angeles.
Okay, well, you're from the Los Angeles tribe of yeah.
Yes, of Ireland, sure.
Sorry, I heard that in there, but my husband's from Ireland, so perhaps I sound a little
Yeah, I went to school in Britain. I think that's what you're hearing.
So this is the first time we talked about the summit. We haven't, but we have our tentative dates. Actually, they're fairly solid, but the dates for that summit will be in May, 16th, 17th, and 18th. That's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And certainly all are welcome. And if you follow Movement Rights on Facebook or get our online newsletter, you'll certainly be kept abreast of all of that. It'll be a large effort with a number of other organizations. So, the idea is that we hopefully blanket social media through all of the organizations that are beginning to stand up to participate in this. It's really about bringing in other groups that don't necessarily work strictly on rights of nature or work on rights of nature at all, but are working on fossil fuels and oil and gas pipelines, all of that coming together to really thread this through. And it'll be the first such, it'll be in Oklahoma. And that's also a first to have this sort of large gathering on this topic in Oklahoma. It's going to be, they're really making a huge statement, but we want people to see the land and then we want to meet the people. There'll be actually some ceremony included because this is about also learning how the Ponca Nation does activism. And that's not just about meetings, it's about, how do you stand on the land in a different way. So you're all welcome to join us and love to have all of you there as part of it. It's definitely going to be different than other sort of similar oil and gas summits. And yes, there will be workshops, but there will be definitely threads around Indigenous rights, threads of a strong thread of rights of nature. There'll be local community will be heavily involved. The tribe will be heavily involved. There'll be a dance ceremony. There'll be activities led by the tribal children in terms of a direct action that will take place there. And it's just going to have a very different vibe in addition to all of the stuff that usually happens at these summits. And as far as keeping up with, so the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature put on the amazing, and Hannah was a huge part of that, event in Quito, and the others on this call, Margaret and I are part of the executive committee of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. And it was a tremendous summit. I'm sorry that you weren't there to share in it. There are, and I'm sure Hannah can share the resources for how to learn a little bit more about what happened there and watch some of the presentations, including Casey's presentation from there.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we have a website called rightsofnaturesymposium.com, and there we will be putting up the report that we have on the symposium with some more information, like more practical information. And then there you also have the agenda, and there is a live stream link that is still available if you would like to watch. I do not have access to all the PowerPoint presentations, but we have recorded material. So right now our communicator is in process of going through all that recorded material, which will be uploaded on our YouTube channel in the upcoming months, since it takes some time to edit and add translation and stuff like that. So yeah, that's so keep an eye out on the webpage Rights of Nature Symposium.com, and also on the page I'm sending you here, rightsofnature.org, which is our official website of GARN. So there will also be some information about the symposium linked to the symposium webpage. Is there any last question before we close the session for today?
I'd just like to say we have one other, this is such an intimate webinar community where people signed up, and in California, of course, a lot of people are also, the fires have certainly had a huge impact on what's happening with folks here in California. So that may be part of the size of here, if Frauke or how to pronounce it, but I wanted to just acknowledge and thank all of you for being on the call, and open the floor, Frauke, if you want to say anything, have any questions, and then maybe we could just turn on all of the microphones so that we could just say, goodbye to each other in sort of real time.
Of course, of course. I actually have one thought. What is like, if we look forward now, what does the Ponca tribe aim for? Does the Ponca tribe now want to inspire other tribes to do the same, or what is like the vision for them by taking this historical step in the U.S.?
So I think Ponca have, as Casey said, have been leaders throughout their history in many ways, and been first in many. In fact, I think it was the Ponca gave the very first gift of foreign aid historically to the Irish. They had sent money and food during the Irish famine, which been turned away, but so there historically have been leaders, and are very proud of their leadership in many fronts. There are, of course, lots of leaders, not just the Ponca, on many topics, but they are definitely looking forward to assisting other tribes to understand this as a tool for the tribes on their own terms, assist them with movement rights, help pass laws if they're, so doing so. The international forums are a part of that, as well as to putting this into their tribal constitution and really bringing the oil and gas community to see what they've done, so that they can also support non-tribal communities as well in for them. So the oil and gas summit is part of that. Casey has stepped up her presence at conferences and international forums, like at the Global Alliance Summit in Quito, to present there and elsewhere, to give recognition about what they've done to inspire others to take next steps, and not just with movement rights, but with all of the people around the world who are doing this work. So we're happy to, partner with the Ponca Nation, but we're obviously not the only group working on rights of nature. So this is also about introducing, as Casey sees it, other folks to all of the broader community, and to learn as well from others who are doing this work around the globe. And Ansu, yes, please connect with me. I would love to talk about communications and volunteering, or what kind of opportunities we have to sort of build this network.
Sure, that'd be
The
great.
people on this call, yeah, that would be wonderful. I would love it. So
Can I find you through a web page or?
Yeah. So my email, if Hannah, if you want to put up that opening slide, is that possible?
Yeah, sure. I can. Do you want me to put the email in the?
I'll put it in.
Maybe right directly.
There's my email. Anybody, of course, is welcome to directly, and really happy to continue the conversation. That's what these webinars are for, even when they're just a small but mighty group of people connecting.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation and for taking part of this webinar. If there are any other questions or comments, you have Shannon's email, so you can get in touch with her. I'm also going to put my email here in case there is anything else you need. I will be contacting you all, sending you the presentation and also the recording of this webinar. And so you will get another email today from me. And if you want to participate in more webinars, we have a webinar approximately every 6 weeks for the upcoming 7 months. So the remaining webinars will be both in English and Spanish. It's a bit mixed. And if you're interested, you can enter on the webpage, The Rights of Nature. There is a section called Webinar Series, and there you can also find the program with all the webinars coming up. And there will also be an evaluation form sent to you in the email that I will be sending later. And I would be really grateful if you could fill that out to let us know what you thought about the webinar, the registration process, and if there's anything that we can improve in. It's very valuable information, not only for us at GARN, but also for speakers. So thank you again for taking part of this webinar, and I would love to see all your faces so that we can say goodbye together.
Well, thanks, Shannon. I don't have my camera connected, but want to thank you and everyone, Hannah, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you at a GARN event soon.
Sounds good.
I look forward to, thank you, Pamela. Thanks for being here, and I hope we can connect soon. Thanks to Hannah for organizing this, to Margaret, to Ansu, and to the other person on the call.
Hi, I just wanted to say it was such an enriching, such a well-described webinar, and I learned so much about the process that the Ponca tribe took as an example for other tribes and other jurisdictions, really, even US cities and counties.